If your Shopify store is stuck between $50,000 to $100,000 per month, the only thing standing between you and multiple 6 and even 7 figures per month with Google Ads is how you run your Google Ads strategy. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what it takes to take your Shopify store from 5 to 6 figures per month to over 6, 7, and even 8 figures per month profitably, exclusively using Google Ads. And I know this strategy works because these are some of the brands which we have been able to scale and do exactly this. Brands running at almost an 11x ROAS doing $1 million a month in revenue, or even brands on the smaller range doing about $400,000, $200,000 a month in revenue at a 7x ROAS, 10x ROAS, and the list literally goes on and on. Now, the first thing you want to understand, which separates a brand barely doing 40, 50K per month versus a brand doing a $1.7 million per month, it's not the products that they sell, it's not the niche they're in, rather it's how they even approach the Google Ads platform itself. It's specifically about the mindset. Now, there's a very big difference in terms of the thinking and thought process that goes into the Google Ads strategy and the overall business structure itself for a brand that does 50 or 100K per month versus a brand that does $1 million or more per month. And this is the fact that the 50 to 100K per month stores, they are focused on running campaigns versus the brand that is mid 6 figures to mid 7 figures per month. They're more focused on running systems. There's a big distinguishment between both of these because the brands that are focused on running campaigns, they're always in this sort of circular loop where they're chasing one campaign type after the other. They're chasing one structure after the other in the hopes that one specific campaign is enough to take their brand to the next level. And what they fail to realize is that Google Ads should be treated as an ecosystem, because essentially that's what it is. It's an ecosystem of smaller bits and pieces, smaller campaign types, standard shopping, search, PMAG, all of them brought together to make the whole, essentially. And this kind of leads into the nitty-gritty details of how these campaigns work, which we'll go over very shortly. But the brands which are 5 to 6 figures per month, those are focused on optimizing for the nitty-gritty metrics such as CTRs, CPCs, or overall search impression share, click share, whereas the brands that are mid 6 to mid 7 figures per month, they're focused on optimizing for profitability and scalability. So all of their account structure, from the way they're adding their products, from the way their landing pages are laid out, to what they do on the strategy side, the campaigns they launch, it's all about optimizations, efficiency, and scale. And this brings me to the major point of how you should even be approaching Google Ads, because I know for a fact that many brand owners believe that scale is all about doing more, adding more campaigns, more ads, more products, more this, more that. And all this does at the end of the day is make the entire system a bit too complex, because keep in mind, this whole ecosystem, the easier it is for the algorithm to point the bits and pieces, the better it will function and the more results it will get your brand. But when you go in, when you give it 50, 100 different things to do, that's when things really start to crumble down, because scaling is less about more ads and more about feeding the Google Ads algorithm the right data. That's literally it. Just get the Google Ads algorithm on your side by feeding it the right data, by making things easy for it, and it will reward you with 6, 7, 8 figures in revenue, and that too profitably. But this brings me to the second part of the equation, which truly scales the brand beyond the 6 and 7 figure level. It is foundations. You cannot escape foundations. You cannot have a bad foundation in place with an extremely good Google Ads strategy, because even if you hire the best Google Ads person on this planet, it's not going to work, period, because your foundations do not support that scale. Foundations are made up of a variety of different things. Number one is the product feed itself, from the images to the titles to the pricing, merchant attention reviews, promos, so on and so forth. Number two, landing page experience. Your landing page determines the quality of your foundation and determines what happens after the initial click. Number three, perceived value of your brand as a whole. You could have the best foundation on this planet. You could have the best landing page that is created by the Leonardo da Vinci of CRO, of website design. But even then, your brand has a chance of failing if the perceived value of your entire brand is weak. Think of it like basically the first impression you have of somebody. If they're very well dressed, if they speak with very high vocabulary, or just speak from their mind versus just blabbering about random things, you immediately have a high perceived value of them, you immediately think of them as some sort of authority or at least a decent, trustable figure. Whereas if you find some homeless person on the street, although they're still a human being, at the end of the day, their clothes might be all raggedy and all messed up. The way they speak, you might not even understand what they're saying. And that immediately, even though they could be the most kindest person on this planet, puts a negative image of them inside your mind. It's the same thing here. First impression matters tremendously. And seven-figure brands that actually scale to multiple 7 and 8 figures, they're seen as an authority in the industry, even if their product is pretty much mediocre. Like, you could be selling the same thing as your competitor who might be a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar brand, and you would be struggling to scrape by simply because the entire audience and the market does not view your brand in the same limelight as they view that competitor's brand, because it potentially has more authority. So what you want to understand as an e-commerce founder, marketing manager, is the end result is not the one that truly matters, because at the end of the day, you could be selling the same exact thing as your competitor that's doing multi-million or billion dollars in revenue. It's rather about the experience. How does the customer feel when they see your ads? How do they feel when they click on your button? How do they feel when they're going through landing pages, from the landing page to the cart page to the checkout page? What happens after? All these things is what a 7 and 8 figure brand is more focused on versus just the next campaign strategy or the next bidding structure, so on and so forth. But ultimately, for 7 and 8 figure brands, it's about approaching the Google Ads auction differently, because their foundations are built on quality over volume. If you're in the mid 5-6 figure range, even early 7 figure range, for you it's more about volume, launching more campaigns, products, doing this, doing that. For a real brand that's scaled beyond 7, 8, 9 figures, it's more about quality and consistency versus just launching a bunch of random things. That's why it takes a lot longer for decisions to happen with bigger brands, because they have to go through multiple departments, multiple team members before something even gets decided. And although in some situations that's not an ideal approach, with Google Ads that definitely can be something that benefits them. But part 3 now, the third part of all of this approach, is campaign architecture for scale. So basically, how you structure your Google Ads account. And the most important strategy, it doesn't matter what campaigns you use to make this happen, by the way, and this strategy is backed by over 500 brands, which we have scaled under my Google Ads agency, Euro Marketing, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need some extra help scaling to the next level with Google Ads, go onto my website at euromarketing.com, schedule a completely free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen. But the TPS method, which stands for testing, profitability, and scaling, is the ultimate go-to, which I have really mastered because it's something I individually developed myself, working with my own brand as well as other brands. But the way it works is fairly simple. For testing, the T portion of the TPS approach, you want to start with high buying intent keywords and standard shopping or performance max campaigns to validate winners. That's literally it. You don't have to overcomplicate the testing process. It could be as simple as just launching a standard shopping campaign or a PMAX with all of your products in it. Of course, it's better if you have product segregation in place and so on and so forth, but the minimal approach you should have is just a standard shopping or performance max, or ideally both in today's time and age, to test all of your products, give it the room it needs to show you what works and what doesn't, because that brings us to the P portion of the TPS approach, which stands for profitability. Now, with profitability, it's about shifting the budgets from just testing stuff to now actually focusing a bit more on what's already working. And from the T approach, the testing approach, you should already have found something that works. In that situation, you don't want to move something to a different campaign strategy that's already working. Instead, keep the things working right where they are and move everything else that's not working or hasn't been tested properly to another campaign strategy or a campaign approach, because you don't want to risk having something that's working stop working because now you changed it from that original approach. Third is scaling, which kind of ties into the P portion, the profitability portion, where now you do vertical scaling through bids, increasing or decreasing the bids as needed, budgets as well, and basically expanding in terms of volume. That's where volume scale comes in. You could also be scaling horizontally, which is by adding more campaign types, search, YouTube, demand gen, etc. But the TPS approach on a fundamental level is what all of your campaigns should follow, of course with proper segregation. And you want to be introducing the smart bidding based campaigns like Performance Max, for example, as a scaling layer, not just a random starting point just to make your life easier so you can rely on automated bidding. But that's then going to bring us to expansion, because at this point, you should already have something that's cooking, something that's already working in a good way, and you should already know what products work, what landing pages work, what styles your audience wants to see, so on and so forth, which then brings us to expansion, really going beyond 6, 7, and 8 figures. And this is where you really have to focus on horizontal and vertical scaling, because what separates the brands that get stuck at 5 to 6 figures versus those at high 6, 7, 8 figures per month, it's number one, the search volume. But of course, that's something you cannot really change with Google. If there's only 10,000 people in a monthly searching for your products, you just cannot force your ads to 20,000 people because their search volume is just not there. But you can go above and beyond, expand beyond the horizons, go after cold traffic, create audience interest, and so on and so forth, expand campaign types to then go forward and reach bigger and bigger pockets of the audience that might be a little bit more broader than what you initially started out with. And it's completely fine as long as you distinguish between the ROI that's coming in and the revenue, because at some point of time when you do this, the ROI is going to dip. It's just a given because you're reaching a bigger pocket of the audience, and it might be lower and lower high buying intent people within this big pocket of the audience. But that's where you have to kind of keep things a bit balanced between ROAS and revenue and switch between both in terms of the scaling strategies and what you're focusing on versus what you're not focusing on. But that's literally the only strategy and the approach that works for these brands going beyond 7, 8, and 9 figures per month with the Google Ads. There's no magic trick. There's no crazy offers or products. It's literally a step-by-step process which starts from the foundation, works all the way up to expansion. And again, if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need extra help scaling to the next level with the Google Ads, go on to my website at yourmarketing.com, schedule a completely free call with me, and let's work together to scale your brand to the very next level.